Well, it's about damn time. Okay, so it's been a long week, really busy. I'm 2 days late on getting the first dev stream analysis posted, but I really want to get these going, get these out there. The graphics will still need a bit of work for this, but it'll be much like a Warframe thing, improves over time. It's better to just get started and get the content out there. So, one of the first things that we're going to talk about is, my format for doing dev stream breakdowns is going to be, I'm going to just tell you everything that was said in the dev stream, and then at the end of it, talking points, half of the video is going to be discussing what we saw. So the first thing we see is the Equinox Deluxe Skin update. It's a very kind of medieval, almost ESO-ish, Final Fantasy-esque kind of deluxe skin that we've had in the works for a while. Part of that's being it's basically 3 Warframe meshes in one, and it's coming along nicely. The next skin we get to see after that is the Ivara Deluxe skin. I'm not gonna lie, I was one of the people who was not excited for this skin. When I saw it, I was just like, that's a Korra Deluxe skin. But this one is actually looking quite nice, if only Ivara's kit looked as nice as the skin does. Following that we get the Gauss primary and secondary weapons that will be coming with him. Those are going to be, for some reason my notes keep jumping to the bottom of the page, but hey, gotta get started somehow. Those are the Exceltra, always a complicated Warframe name to everything in Warframe, and the Arcarius. The Exceltra is a rapid-fire rifle, seems to have a kind of AoE effect to it, which is pretty cool. We haven't exactly gotten directly a rapid-fire rifle with an AoE effect. None that I can think of. You've got beam weapons that can be modded into or have a natural AoE effect to them, and they're rapid fire, but beyond that, we don't exactly have rifles that do that without... There's no explosive rounds except for like the Attica and the Zooge, which aren't exactly rifles, so that will be really interesting to see. It also has a kind of unique mechanic for reloading that is in the sense of Gauss, where the rifle will reload faster if you're sprinting. So just kind of an interesting, neat little thing that will maybe add a bit to the meta. I was just thinking in my head, I was like, what if sprint mods could add to the rate at which you reload the rifle? Something interesting to consider. The Acarius is his secondary, which fire dual projectiles that seem to arm much like the Corinth's secondary fire at a distance, another AoE weapon. Me personally, since I won't talk about these at the end of the video, I love AoE weapons. I especially love safe AoE weapons. I play with lots of frames that are safe for all AoE weapons, like our explosives, like the Coal Star and the Ogress, but it's nice to see those that can be played with all frames, so everyone can feel included. We also found out here that Gauss and Grendel will be separated. was really excited for this, and I'll talk more about it at the end of the video, but they are being separated. Gauss is coming near the end of August for PC in a mainline update. This is a bit surprising because mainline usually comes ahead of our largest updates. So does that mean that Railjack is even sooner than we might be thinking? For those who might not know, it was revealed in DevStream 129 that Railjack will be coming will be coming before The War Within. We're getting a segment of it, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. So here we get our first reveal at Grendel. His abilities being Feast, Nourish, Regurgitate, and Meatball, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. As they show Grendel off here, the weapon, well, he actually doesn't have any dedicated weapons yet. They kind of skinned them to be according to Grendel's appearance. And they show him off here, so while they're showing him off, we got some other reveals as things were talked about with Gauss and before Gauss was even shown. So the Riven cap is getting an increase. We're getting a Riven bump up to 120, which is so very nice. That's 30 extra Rivens. For those who might have multiple accounts like I do just for Rivens, that is going to be an extra 60 slots. So I'm personally very much looking forward to that time to jump back into arbitrations and even get some more sorties done. And then, as well as the Shawzin got an update, we got the Decoration Shawzin, but for those who might not be aware, the Shawzin is meant to be a playable item and will even actually come with an emote for you to take out the Shawzin and play while you're in mission, if you'd like. So that's pretty cool. Not something that has to be shown at this very moment. As well as, and we'll get into some of the disruption footage here in a moment as we're learning about Grendel's abilities, but disruption is being expanded across the game. We'll be getting it on multiple tile sets, and it's worth noting, before we get into the Grendel abilities, that the disruption game mode will have different elements on the Kuva Fortress and on Lua. Lua being the most interesting. The Kuva Fortress will come with Kuva, which is really cool because I've talked about this in multiple videos. Scott in particular, not me. DE Scott talks about how in Warframe you're never gaining one thing in the same way every single time. And Kuva's kind of been stuck in that for about 3 years, where at first it was just, you just do siphons. Finally, we got Kuva Survival, which turned out, I would say, pretty darn well. And now we're getting Disruption. So it'll be nice to have a variety of game modes, and hopefully with Disruption, that will allow you to scale your Kuva. So the elite Kuva, what do I want to call them? The Kuva elitists in our ranks will probably, hopefully, be able to aim to maximize their gains out of Disruption. We'll find out. We will find out. So we start to see some of Grendel's first abilities. His first ability being Feast, which seems to be a frontal conal AoE right in front of him that, hopefully moddable with range, will allow him to suck up multiple enemies. They do suck up multiple enemies in the dev stream, but it's at a limited range. So hopefully it will have some good modability. I have some, we'll get to it at the end of the video, but I have some concerns about gimmickiness between Gauss and Grendel. And then his second ability is Nourish, which is a buffing AoE. It sounds similar to Chroma, where he'll consume the enemies that are inside him. So with Feast, when enemies are held inside you, it consumes enemies, but damage dealt to you is dealt to the enemies that are still inside you. So basically, it's kind of like a Hydroid puddle. Enemies are inside you. You just go ahead and take what you want from that. And the enemies that are inside you are damaged while you're damaged, and you do damage to them over time while they're inside you. Anyway, so then you can go ahead and consume those enemies with Nourish, and that will grant you several different kinds of buffs, armor, seemingly health, or it seems like even a toxin AoE is one they talked about, and we'll go ahead and move into the Mars footage. And what I want to note here isn't really the disruption footage on Mars. It's really going to be the toxin or whatever kind of proc that Grendel does outside of himself when he consumes an enemy that has this like snake-like energy AoE around him. It's really cool. I'm actually super interested in it. This is the ability that I'll definitely want to get my hands on. And then one of the abilities we got to see in the planes footage that we'll talk about here, that we'll also see Grendel do as he's in his final ability. You're not going to be regurgitating enemies while in your final ability, but that is his third ability, Regurgitate. When you regurgitate enemies, you spit them back out, and this has a very interesting implication here in the dev stream footage, where basically you can spit enemies into an open skybox. So if you're not in one of the enclosed tile sets, you can shoot enemies into space. They got a huge kick out of this. They didn't realize that's how it was programmed. I think everybody who is probably watching got a huge kick out of this. I really hope this doesn't get nerfed. Like I said, I'll express my concerns about Grendel coming up in the latter half of the video. I'd like to stay objective in this portion, but for killing a single target enemy, like one enemy at a single time, that is just to kill a dedicated enemy, because it seems like they don't have plans to let Grendel consume every enemy possible, and certainly not to be able to regurgitate at every enemy possible. It seems like something that should stay, the ability in these open skyboxes to be able to eliminate a single given enemy. That heavy gunner, let's get rid of it. Bam, it's gone. Because there are a lot of Warframes that can already do this, whether it's in crowds like with Saturn or with Volt. Louis up in the window and he wants to be a part of the recording now, so you're hearing him. Or to be able to just knock out dedicated enemies with frames like Wukong, Excalibur. You've got frames like Wisp that can really DPS down enemies. Who for those who don't know, she can combine her third ability with her fourth ability for some massive non-dedicated single target damage. Take a look at the little wisps that shoot out of her blinded enemies as you're damaging them, to really watch where her damage can come from. Louis has a lot to say today. So anyway, then the final ability for Grendel is Meatball. So this one we'll get to in a minute. I feel gimmicky about it. Like I said, we'll come back to it. It's a physics-based ball that has an AoE consumption area for consuming enemies. And this will be important. Again, really hope this is range moddable. Not capped, not strict, just very range moddable. Consumes enemies as it rolls, that also uses up energy while in meatball form, and you have to be careful not to consume all your energy, otherwise there will be a penalty, or at least at this time within the dev bill, there will be a penalty. Beyond that, as we watch them discover that you can shoot enemies into space, it's worth noting that things that will be coming with things within the realm of separation between Grendel and Gauss. They're still besties according to the devs, but Gauss will come out of Disruption expansion and will have some kind of lore implication. So basically you'll be able to farm some or all of Gauss's parts from the new Disruption being spread out across multiple tile sets. And then basically what they're saying is there isn't going to be a story component here, but somehow they're going to implicate lore. So it won't directly be Baruch or Hildren, who basically you go get parts and that's it. There's no story behind them. So they're wanting to answer this need for lore, but not to give up too many dev assets, development hours to things like prime trailers, things like constructing entire stories, but only get played once and have no benefit of really being replayed. So that is what it is. I personally don't want to see the two of them separated. I would even take having both of them put into the game at the same time over even getting lore elements, but I know there's a lot of people out there who would really like to see those lore elements come to life. And we don't know where Grendel will be, where we'll gain Grendel from after that. Probably something with Railjack would be a pretty apparent guess. Finally, we got a look at Railjack's systems. We'll move past so one of the other things they announced is infested dojo decorations, and there'll be a number of forum questions we'll talk about in here as the Railjack flies in as they explore the Saturn tile set or I guess we'll call it space landscape for Railjack, but as they explore all that, things that were talked about, questions from the forums, we're getting a shield aura. It was as simple as, we've got a sprint aura, we've got an armor aura, we've got a health aura. Are we going to get a shield aura? And Steve was just like, sure. We're getting a Melee 3.0 update. Apparently there are those who still would prefer a kind of quick Melee-esque gameplay style. And, I kind of think about that sometimes, where it's like, I've as a player who plays on controller, because PS4, I've pressed circle, I've pressed my melee button, and I kind of expect that I still have my weapons in my hand. I want to kind of see my primary, I kind of want to see my secondary, which one am I on, things like that, and it's worth playing around with, and it doesn't sound like it's too hard of a toggle, and it trailed into one of the reasons we're starting to see a bit more of a content drip right now, because after TennoCon is when everyone goes on their vacations, so apparently it's something that they've been talking about addressing. As well as, so Rebecca flew her ship in, so we get to see a lot more of the ship customization, and this is also important because it highlights our ability to customize the colors of the ship and also the textures of the ship. That was something very important they wanted to talk about. So then we also get to see, they also talked about everyone being on holiday. Syndicates are getting updates for mods and other odds and ends that have kind of been missing for a while, that things like Nightwave have kind of taken over, so there will be updates to the syndicates. There's some stuff they can't talk about. There'll even be kind of a syndicate update they're going to talk about in here. Before we continue with all of that, we finally get our first look at research, engines, thrusters, weapons, possibly more. We're taking a look at the weapons, battle, tactical, and Railjack Systems screen right here, where basically they talk about every component put into the Railjack drains from the pool of energy that's right there in the center over the Railjack. And basically, at any point, the menu can be brought up to turn different configurations of the slots on and off. So instead of going into a mission with a dedicated set of Railjack components, instead you'll go in with all of your components that you want equipped. And it sounds like you'll even be able to swap some components in and out mid-mission. These components are not upgradable, but will have different roles, i.e., like an example being 3% ship health, but these components will have better rolls. So you could get a 5% ship health and the 5% ship health regeneration. And the cost to that would then be the 5% costs more energy. So if you want different configurations of the components, you can have them. Components are not upgradable, as we discussed. Even weapon systems can be turned off. So you can the what they show here is the cloaking component costs 60 energy. That's a ton, but since you're going to be cloaked, there's no need to have to dedicate more energy to the weapon systems that you won't be using, as you're cloaked until that time is necessary. Weapons and components will be boosted with resources going into missions, as they talked about in TennoCon, and slots that components will be slotted into on this screen are upgradable at this juncture in the dev build. So basically, it's not that, so like vice versa to Warframes, instead of upgrading the mods, which let's call the components mods, will be actually upgrading the ship itself instead of the components. So you could have the primary weapon component slot upgraded past the other two weapon slots. So you want to make sure your primary weapon, your primary guns are in that slot instead of the other two slots. That's what it sounds like right now. And honestly, that sounds pretty good. I like the ideas of this, and I'd like to see how they echo throughout the game. I don't think I want them to translate to our weapons and our Warframes. I think the style in which we play with that stuff is fine, and I guess I can get into the talking points now as we continue to go over Railjack stuff. But I think that is in a good place. What does need to be changed out of that style is kind of the damage structure. That's what needs to be worked on. So before we get into all the talking points, let's go ahead and finalize Railjack. The energy pool is the last thing we need to talk about. It sounds like the energy pool is another piece of the ship that will be upgraded as we progress through the Railjack systems, and of course, all of this being subject to change because it's on the dev build and because it's Warframe. It's a game constantly in beta, so we might have it for a year or two and then it gets completely upheaved and changed into something else.
We're gonna go to Galleon Dave.
Finally, our first segment of Railjack coming this fall, as detailed in DevStream 129. We'll be getting Railjack in the fall. Oh my god! Will surprisingly be Grenier first. Didn't expect that. A lot of me and my friends were discussing like it's probably going to be a balance, Grenier and Corpus. But no, they're just going straight for Grenier. It sounds like it'll probably be something like Earth. We saw the flushed out tile set for Earth. We see the Saturn tile set today. So it'll probably be those two, and my guess would be the Heliosphere, since that seemed to be most completed, and then the dry dock. And so we see Saturn Railjack coming up here in the video, and a couple other things to talk about will be Railjack's personality will come out with a Fire Emblem like NPC interaction. So it sounds like a lot of conversing with your NPCs, getting to know them, helping them to grow as people, helping them to make poor life decisions, things like that. And part of hiring NPCs and the Syndicate update, which has been in need for some time, will come from hiring Syndicate members. And this is something me and a friend even discuss on upcoming Save the Frames, where I'll actually have a guest on. And we want to see NPCs on the Railjack. We even want to go as far as to see like some of the core NPCs: Utico, Little Duck, Kanzu, Quill Anko. Like, it would be awesome to see these members on our Railjack. Like some of your top tier NPCs, and you really have to work hard to get them. Here we see the Galleon Dave, which actually isn't even a galleon, it's an asteroid mine. This alludes to their still so like Jupiter was shown as Saturn here. They used Jupiter on the navigation to fly into Saturn. And this kind of alludes to there needing to be a bit more polish on Railjack before we actually see it. So what does that mean? We're hearing about a mainline coming out. What do we know about mainline updates? Mainline updates often smooth out all the rough edges of the game right before a big drop. So the big drop is Railjacks, which means it's within a month and a half's time frame, we could assume. So that means that we're aiming to see this by the end of September and probably mid to late October. So that doesn't sound too far off with the few rough edges we've seen here behind the curtain. So that makes sense. And one question I got to ask before I get into talking points. Are we going to be landing on Saturn and Jupiter moons? That would be nuts. Like, if we go to Mars, are we going to be landing on Deimos? Since Phobos and Europa are, their own separate tile sets. But, like, they've talked about being able to land on extra planetary bodies. Is that going to be a thing? So, with all of that in mind, let's get into the talking points. I love what they showed here with Railjack. To kind of really put the simplified touch on it, it seems like what they're doing is giving us a kind of mod set. You go in with a mod set for Railjack, and all of those mods are turned off. And you pull up your mod menu at any time and just click, all of them turn on. Or you turn on as many as you can, limited by the ship energy pool on. And I think that's a great design correlation too, where we're used to having an energy pool to work within, or some kind of resource that it has a constraint on it but is generous enough. Big question will there be energy regeneration? No, there probably won't be energy regeneration, because it's a pool. If we have energy regeneration, we'd be able to turn on more and more systems as more time progressed. So there won't be an energy pool.
All right, let's go back to full screen.
How far are we able to extend some of these? I love the idea that we're going to be going out and farming these components. We're going to be looking for the better components and even the weaker components at the same time. Again, this difference between having like a 3% health generation for our ship and a 5% health generation for our ship. That 3% costs less, so it could pair nicely with an armor or a shield for the ship. And then the 5% could be for a different style of play with your Railjack, which means we're going to want multiples of them, not just, well, I only want the best one. That allows for a lot of gameplay to come out. It's almost like being able to start Warframe fresh again. That is such a unique feeling that is so hard to imitate, to get back to starting Warframe again. From there, the rest of the talking points are... Now I have to scroll up on my prompter. The rest of the talking points are Riven Cap increase, that's amazing. The Disruption game mode, my guess is the Lua reward is going to be something to do with the sentient arms, sentient components. Possibly if we're still going to see a sentient lab. I don't see why we will finally get another faction and not have a lab for it. Starting to get into Grendel and Gauss, one of my concerns for both of them is kind of making sure they're not gimmicky frames. Gauss is one of those that, and I've talked to friends about this, it seems like this is a frame we need to get our hands on before we really fully understand his capabilities. It's felt like putting him out in front on the dev streams has not been enough. One of my friends feels like he's either going to hit right on the mark or miss the mark completely. I have a feeling he's going to land in the middle, where it's like, this is nice, but not enough. Grendel is one I'm probably more concerned for, and let's just go ahead and manually skip forward into my background footage for the big man. Meatball seems the most gimmicky. One of the first things I thought was, oh no, here's Zephyr's tornado again. One of my big problems with Zeph, and I actually really like Zeph, is she needs a kit rework. She needs some love, but the tornadoes are damaging, but definitely out of your control, still too far out of your control even with trying to aim to direct them. And they're just so dinky. It's, here's a little wind, and it just kind of goes that wrong direction on the battlefield. And a lot of Warframe, a lot of what's fulfilling about Warframe is not only feeling powerful, but seeing how powerful you are. And Zephyr's tornadoes definitely fall short of that. And I feel like Meatball already kind of looks like it's too much of a gimmick. It's too hard to kind of stay in control to be effective to the point of where we are with modern day Warframe today. It depends on how it mods. I think that's going to be a big one. It depends on how it mods. If that kind of AoE aura that it has around it scales well, then that will determine how well it does. If you're just kind of rolling and within like 25 meters you're just sucking bitches in, cool. You know, like that could be pretty cool. But we'll see where its caps are, how it mods. And I think another big concern of mine is what determines if you suck up an enemy or not. You know, like it's kind of like Atlas's Petrify before he got reworked. Is it going to be, well, you have to have a particular power strength, or is it just naturally going to let you consume enemies? But then that has limitation issues. So I think that I would love to see the size of Meatball increased by double. I know that when you consume enough enemies, it gets increased by double. I want to see it twice the size of that. I want to see players feeling and looking powerful. And that's a concern with that ability. I actually tweeted at the devs. I was like, could we also make the movement set mods effective on this ability? And that could even apply to Gauss as well, where I'm not just talking about sprint speed or maglev or things like that. I'm talking about like lightning dash and toxic flight and ice spring and I forget the fire one, but like to actually see those not just translate to your bullet jump, but translate to these movement-based abilities where you're electric procking, fire procking, toxic procking, ice procking enemies as you're running past them, rolling past them, or through them. That could be really cool. Beyond that, let's go ahead and scroll through the notes, make sure there's nothing else left to hit the talking points with. Really looking forward to the AoE weapons. I love AoE weapons. I talked about that earlier. I'm a bit sad to really see the Gauss and Grendel being separated. Would have loved to have seen two Warframes arrive at the same time. I could not have been more excited for that. Other than that, this was a phenomenal dev stream. We got a ton out of it. We don't know when the next dev stream is going to be, so let's go ahead and get this posted, and I hope you guys, even if late, enjoy someone else throwing their opinion out there into the ring of Warframe and everything it has to offer. I've been Scott, Chaos SD of Ramble Entertainment. Thank you for watching, guys, and Tenno, get out there and do good things.
We need to put a little bit of drag on them. Currently, there's no drag, so you can just launch them forever.
Guys, let's enjoy the fun for now. Oh my God!
That is a projectile vomit if I ever saw it.
Let's go.
Wow.